My job really is to welcome you this evening. I know it's a little bit warm because of the wonderful weather outside, but hopefully kind of you won't be too hot. We've got a really superb panel for you this evening, and we'll be hearing kind of brief kind of introductions and speeches from each of them, and then we're going to have the opportunity for questions, and then we'll wrap up about 8 o'clock for drinks and canapes, so please stick around for that as well. Just some very non-exciting but important housekeeping. So we're not expecting a fire drill this evening, everybody. So if there is a fire drill, we will be following the fire exits to escape the building. Toilets, if you haven't yet found them, you will walk out and just go straight down the corridor, and they're on your left-hand side. If there's anybody here, we think we will finish in plenty of time, but if there's anybody here breaking their fast tonight for Ramadan, there is a prayer room, kind of a created prayer room, but a very private space that you can have prayer in, which is downstairs on the ground floor on your left-hand side, where you collected your badges this evening. I think I would just ask everybody to please put your phones on silent, and I would urge you not to look at your phone for the next hour, because like the people here are too good to hear and really worth enjoying. So I'll be sitting down now myself, but I just really hope that you have a wonderful kind of next hour and then rich opportunity for drinks and canapes afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor, and welcome everyone this evening. My name is Anushka Asthana. I work for The Guardian, and I'm going to host this wonderful panel that we've got for you over the next hour. We're going to start by them speaking, each to you, and then at the end of it we'll be able to have a Q&A. I guess if you're not looking at your phones, although Eleanor is literally looking at her phone right now, that means we're not tweeting? No tweeting? Ooh. Oh, here we go.
Sometimes when you're really excited to get started, you forget a couple of important things. So, a couple of things. We had emailed everybody beforehand that we are filming this on Facebook Live this evening for people that are unable to attend in person. There is also a couple of journalists in the room, separate to Anushka, who is chairing, and they are taking some photographs. Obviously, if you don't want to be in a photograph, please just let the journalist know, and that is not a problem at all. Yes? And I would say, obviously our colleagues might be tweeting, but during the actual discussion, we're not tweeting, so people can listen to the rich intelligence they're about to hear.
Well, that is very refreshing, because normally I'm used to looking at people head down, hands on phones. So let me just introduce our panel, and then I'll hand over to them to speak. Lord Dubs doesn't really need much introduction. I think to political journalists, particularly at The Guardian, he's a bit of a legend. Am I allowed to call you that? A former child refugee.
You can call me Alf, please.
or Alf, a former child refugee and a big supporter of Safe Passage ever since it started up. Next to him, Charlotte Kilroy QC, who is a leading lawyer in this area. She's been involved in some groundbreaking cases to do with reuniting children and their parents in this area. So we'll be hearing from her after that. Then we have got Darby O'Donnell, who is a solicitor working with Safe Passage, who'll talk to us about some of the work that you're doing specifically at the moment. And then Gulwali Pasaleh, who is an author, the author of The Lightless Sky, which is about, there we go, don't Google it, not yet, which is about a boy from Afghanistan's journey to escape. And I'm really excited to hear from all of you and then to have a discussion afterwards. You have to stick to 8 minutes, I'm told, otherwise you'll get in trouble. So can we start with Alf?
Okay, thank you.
Alf is going to go with it.
Right, and thank you very much indeed for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to be supporting Safe Passage. You're absolutely brilliant. You don't have to listen to me. You're absolutely brilliant. Just one little anecdote to get things started. There was a legal JR taking place, and they asked me to go in there to the High Court and just sit there and look interested. So I got in that court. The court already started, and there was a Home Office official sitting behind the Home Office lawyers, and he looked at me, saw me come in, and he gave me what I would call the least enthusiastic smile I've ever had. So I thought that wasn't bad. Let me just describe briefly one or two things that have happened on the way, getting where we are with some successes and some not successes. I won't go through the whole saga of the amendments and so on, but just to say, at one point, Theresa May as Home Secretary, and I think that's a fairly topical name, so I can use it. Theresa May wanted me to see about the amendment I had, which was to bring in children who don't have family here, as opposed to the Dublin Treaty to bring in children who do have family here. Okay? Anyway, I went in to see her, and she said to me, she wanted me to withdraw the amendment. And I said, why? And she said, well, she said, if these children come, more will follow. So I said, that's the government's argument. So I said, by the way, we've made this non-party. This is not because I'm a Labour Party hack, it doesn't mean it's a Labour Party thing. And indeed, we've gone out of our way to get support across the political spectrum. But anyway, she said to me that more will want to follow. And I said, but we can't turn our backs on children sleeping in the jungle or in camp on the Greek islands and so on. So then she said something to me, which I kept very quiet. There is another scheme, which is the Vulnerable Person Scheme, which takes families, including children, from the region, that's to say from Lebanon, Jordan and Turkey. And she said, if you drop your amendment, and she didn't quite use these words, but the effect was to say, I'll do you a deal. We'll allow 3,000 more on top of the 20,000. So I said, oh great, we can do both. Anyway, we parted company. But here's the thing, that 3,000 stayed in the system. So those of you that know about the Vulnerable Person Scheme will know it's 20,000 plus 3,000. I couldn't talk about it too much in case the Home Office realised it failed to delete it from the policy. So anyway, it was a little victory that we couldn't do very much about. I paid about four visits to Calais. I've been to Greece 3 times. I've also been to a camp in Jordan. And my last visit to Calais was about a week and a half ago. And it is as shocking to go now as it was when the jungle was there. The first time I went to the jungle, they'd already cleared part of the camp. And the French authorities said, I said, in the shopping street, why are the displays of tear gas canisters and rubber bullets? And I was told that the then French government was worried about the National Front being very strong in northern France. And so they were using tear gas and canisters to clear half the camp, which I find quite shocking because you don't defeat the National Front by using the practices that they would use. However, when I went last time, because the camp is gone, and there are people sleeping pretty rough, and it's a desperate situation, because if there are no legal paths to safety, and thanks to Safe Passage, we've been fighting hard to have legal paths to safety, if there are none, then what do people do? They're desperate. They've travelled halfway across the world to get to northern France, and they're pretty desperate, and they'll jump on the back of an lorry, or be taken by a boat by a trafficker, and it is all pretty desperate and dangerous. And so our job, I think, is to provide legal paths. I've always said that we can't take all the children. We should take our share. We should take our share of the unaccompanied child refugees, and indeed of all refugees. Take our share. We're not doing that. We're not the worst. There's some countries like Hungary that won't take any, but I think we could do a lot better, and that's part of the theme. And Safe Passage, in fact, have got the campaigning ask, which came from that great meeting in Friends Meeting House last autumn, that on the anniversary of the kinder transport, to say that we got 10,000 children, including me, under 1 year from Germany, Austria, and Czechoslovakia, and the ask now is of the government to take 10,000 children over 10 years, 1,000 a year, or under 5 per local authority. And that will be both from Europe and from the region. It's a very small ask, and we're still waiting for the government to respond. Maybe when things calm down in Westminster, the government will be thinking about these issues as well as about Brexit. The other thing I want to say is this, that I found it very humbling, whichever refugee camp I've been to, the young people, mainly from this country, but not only so, who are most committed volunteers, who are giving up a year or 2 of their lives in order to help their fellow human beings. I think that's absolutely terrific. They don't get many accolades, not written about, they're not talked about, and I think there's some terrific people And we should be proud in this country that some of the young people from here are doing that. You know, I know they're bankers and all sorts of things. I better be careful here. But you didn't hear me say that. And these are people who worship for nothing, are willing to work under the auspices of Safe Passage and other NGOs, willing to do this. And I think that is absolutely terrific. And there's one other thing I want to say, and it's this. I went to Jordan. Now, Jordan is a well-organized camp. The biggest camp there is actually has 80,000 people. And unlike the terrible camps on the Greek islands or the jungle in Calais, or what's left where the jungle was in Calais, they've got water, they've got solar panels and so on, and it's better organized. And the schools. I was talking to a young man there, and he said to me, I've had my education, what are you going to do? I said, I can't get a job in the camp, I can't get a job outside the camp. No future at all. It's too dangerous for him to go back to Syria. And I think my sense of it is that human beings can put up with awful physical conditions if there is hope. If they have hope, they can struggle against difficult physical conditions. But where there is no hope, there is just despair. And it is really the lack of hope which characterizes so many of the refugees in the world, whether it's the ones in Greece, the ones in the better physical conditions in Jordan, in northern France, or even the Rohingyas who fled from Myanmar into Bangladesh. It is the lack of hope which characterizes it. And one of the things Safe Passage can do is to give people hope by working hard on getting legal paths to safety. I mean, that is an enormous, important contribution. Just one thing about the camps in Greece. I thought I was in Greece 2 or 3 months ago on Lesbos, and the large camp there. And you know, the Médecins Sans Frontières people in Athens said it's pretty awful as it is, but at night it is so dangerous. There's no safety in the camp. Young people are young men, young women sexually abused in the camp. It's dreadful. And the Greeks aren't really coping, and Europe doesn't want to help the Greeks. So it's a miserable situation, and I would like to feel that Europe as a whole would have an agreed policy on refugees, and we all play our part, and then more countries would step up to the mark and do something, and we could do a bit more. But as I say, the big ask is of the government that they can do a bit more. And I'll tell you a story you may have heard me tell before. I was talking to a young Syrian boy. He was, I think he'd been 14 when he got here, and some of them had terrific, terrible, frightening journeys. You know, one Syrian boy told me he'd seen his father killed in front of him by a bomb in Aleppo. Terrible things to go through. Anyway, the Syrian boy, standing in front of Parliament, he pointed to Parliament, and he said, "You know what I want to do in life?" I said, "No, tell me." He said, "I want to become a member of Parliament." And I said, "Whoops, that's a great ambition, but why don't you meet a few MPs first?"
Thank you very much.
Lord Dubs has been talking about opening new legal routes to arriving in the UK, but there is also the problem of using existing legal routes. This project, which ultimately led to the creation of Safe Passage out of Citizens UK, started with an attempt to bring 4 children to the United Kingdom to join their siblings. Well, in fact, it was 3 children and a vulnerable adult. And even though there was an established legal route to come to the UK using the Dublin III regulation, there was no system in place for children or their families to activate that route, because it required a level of cooperation between 2 member states of the European Union, France and the UK, in gathering evidence, in ensuring that children knew about their rights, and then in considering the applications that they made. So when this project began, we asked the UK government to work with the French to open those legal routes for these 3 children and 1 vulnerable adult sibling of one of the children. And the government said no. The
government said, until we receive a claim for asylum, this is nothing to do with us. And they wouldn't even contact the French government to suggest a way through what was effectively a bureaucratic impasse. So this litigation began by writing directly to the Secretary of State for the Home Department and saying, all right, you won't work with the French authorities to use Dublin III, but we say these children have got independently an Article 8 right, that is the right to family life under the European Convention on Human Rights, to join their family members here. So you have got to admit them. And that case ultimately went to court because the government refused. They continued with the mantra, they haven't made a claim for asylum, it's nothing to do with us. And the government lost because of this underlying fundamental right. We were able to show that the system wasn't working between France and the UK, and that if the children tried to use it, they would face delays of up to a year, and that led the courts in the UK upper tribunal, in fact, to make the order that it did for admission. Now, of course, that was a horrific spectre for the government, the idea that people could write directly and say, let me in, and so they started to work with the French to make the system under Dublin III work, so that they were able to say to people, no, you can't write directly to us. So that is an example of how you can start a whole process moving by finding a way around and putting pressure on governments to use the routes that they have. Now that litigation began with Citizens UK finding those 3 children, or referring those 3 children and the vulnerable adult to lawyers in the UK. And since that time, Safe Passage have also been involved in referring other children to lawyers in the UK to enable them to bring cases under Dublin III. But the battle has not stopped there, because even though the route is now opened from France to the UK and is functioning better than it used to, it's still an uphill battle to ensure that the system works in a way so as to enable children to come quickly and easily. And again, there are 2 obstacles to this. One is that the government doesn't actually want these legal routes to work. They think it provides, and I think this is something that Lord Dubs touched on in his conversation with Theresa May, they think it provides an encouragement to other children to come behind. It's the so-called pull factor. And so in order to ensure that there isn't a pull factor, it appears that there is a sense that there is some value in making the process as difficult as possible. And so it is the job of lawyers to battle against that entrenched resistance, which governments, and I don't believe it's just the UK government, I think it's governments everywhere, when they decide that something isn't in their interests, they're prepared to go slow on it, and they have an enormous amount of power to do that. And so the battle continues to try to open up these routes, make them work more smoothly. So we have, working with Safe Passage, myself and other barristers at Doughty Street, lawyers at Migrants Law Project in Bath Murphy, have worked with Safe Passage to try to ensure that some of these routes work better. So, for example, we have now an ongoing case about delays because the French authorities are referring children to the United Kingdom, to the Home Office, saying, look, here is someone who has a sibling, an aunt, they have, in some cases, a parent, although that's less usual, they have a cousin in the UK, please take this child. But the Home Office will say, well, we need to investigate the the family link, and that will take a long time. They haven't devoted the resources to doing that. There is then the investigation of whether it's in the best interest of the child to come. These things all take time. The deadlines are missed, and so we are in court at the moment waiting a judgment on how long the Home Office can take before they can make decisions on these children's cases. Now, of course, in the meantime, children are waiting. They're waiting in France, they're waiting, in these cases, they're usually waiting with foster families or in care homes. But the despair that we see these children suffering, we see it through the medical reports that are put in the litigation, the despair at the process working so much slower and less efficiently than they have been told it will work is so heartbreaking to see. And so really, I suppose the message today is how important it is to keep on battling against these barriers that are put up and to ensure that these legal routes work in the way that they should. Other litigation that we have brought has been related to the duty of investigation. And this goes back to one of the other issues that I mentioned earlier. There is the entrenched resistance to anyone being allowed to enter into the UK because of the pull factor. But there is also always a difficulty when you have cross-jurisdictional litigation, because you have to work in a cooperative fashion with another member state. And particularly in the area of asylum and immigration, states are used to working in their own bubble and not cooperating in order to particularly in order to bring people here. There is an established route of cooperation now for sending people back, but in fact even that doesn't work particularly well. But what they use is the system of fingerprinting, and this is, I think, what most people associate with Dublin 3, is someone comes, they have their fingerprints taken, it's found out that they claimed asylum previously in another member state, and they are sent back. That is the form of cooperation that member states are committed to. But the form of cooperation which involves bringing children to join family members, sadly, is not one which we see a great commitment to, despite words that are bandied around in various public places. But that doesn't mean that progress is not being made. The reality is that with every case, however painful it is to get to that outcome, a step is taken forward, a barrier is broken down, and what the ultimate hope is that by this rather slow but nonetheless important process that brings joy ultimately to these individual children, there will eventually be a smoother route, and the resistance that has characterized this early stage of the litigation will fall away. It will become something that we are as used to as the aspect of Dublin 3 I just mentioned, sending people back. It will become part of the culture of our cooperation in Europe, perhaps within the EU, perhaps outside the EU, that we work together to to reunite families, because after all, what could be more obvious when you only have to say it to realise how crazy it is that you would have a system that places any kind of bureaucratic obstacle in the way of children trying to join their family members when they're unaccompanied. And there are so many benefits, of course, not just to the children themselves, but to society as a whole in reuniting families quickly. Of course, it reduces the trauma that these children suffer and increases their chances of making a proper contribution to society when they are finally settled. The converse is the case. There are real costs to delay, because children then have to basically be patched up by the local authorities, by their families, when they ultimately arrive, because of the trauma that they've suffered during their separation. So Safe Passage plays a critical role in identifying children who are separated from their families in places like Greece, in Italy and in France, and referring them to lawyers in the UK. And that is really the final piece of the jigsaw, because the cross-jurisdictional aspect of Dublin III and family reunification, and the way in which lawyers generally work in an intra-jurisdictional bubble, means that unless someone connects those children with lawyers somewhere, and if it's when the resistance is for family members in the UK, someone has got to connect those children with lawyers in the UK in order to challenge UK decisions in UK courts. And so it is essential to have charities like Safe Passage who are able to join children with those who can assist them. And that is why that work is so important.
Two hard acts to follow, I must say. 2 years ago, almost to this exact date, I called Safe Passage from my apartment in California. I listened to their dream of launching a legal program that would provide free advice to children in Europe who had family in the UK. This was a dream they had created with a network of lawyers, change makers, and campaigners in the aftermath of the Calais demolition, trying to create some order out of the chaos. Their drive and determination was contagious, and I was sold. I moved to London a few months later to join Safe Passage and embark on this journey together. This dream has grown, developed, and today has come true. Access to legal service and representation for these children is more important than ever, and part of the reason is how complicated and inaccessible the legal procedure can be for children without legal assistance. I want to tell you why through a story. We can break down the process into 3 steps, each with its own challenges: engagement, evidence, and evaluation. Engagement. Ahmed arrives to Italy alone at age 15, having made a traumatizing journey across the Mediterranean. He feared for his life while he watched the small boat fill with water, but was eventually rescued by the Coast Guard. We can all imagine this moment in our head because we see it in the media, but this is only the beginning of Ahmed's journey to reach safety. From there, he traveled onwards, sometimes walking for days at a time, until he reached Paris. Ahmed's brother, a university student in London, calls Safe Passage, asking desperately for assistance in getting his brother to safety in the UK. Ahmed is sleeping rough in Paris, afraid to give his fingerprints to the authorities, and afraid to get sent back to Italy, or worse, the country where he fled. He hears stories of other boys jumping on the back of lorries, and smugglers are everywhere, offering transfer to the UK. He thinks that option would be quick, but potentially very dangerous. He hears that the legal process is slow and unpredictable, and he doesn't know where to begin. How can we convince Ahmed to engage with the legal process? We explain the legal procedure to Ahmed and his brother, step by step, often more than once, hoping this knowledge will empower them to make a joint decision. Ultimately, this is about gaining their trust. Without the trust, we don't have a case. So we have to be patient, we have to be compassionate, and we have to be flexible in how we explain the procedure to both of them. We explain that while the outcome is not guaranteed, there is a safe and legal way to the UK. We can help them free of charge, and we think it's worth the wait. We explain that the next step for Ahmed is to engage with the French authorities, essential in making his application for transfer. Othman and his brother ultimately agree, but the engagement with the French authorities proves tricky. As a child, Othman can't register his claim on his own. He needs an appointed guardian to do so. With the help of Safe Passage France, we begin this process, but there are long administrative delays. We make calls, we wait in long lines at government offices, and we keep chasing, and we chase some more. And 2 months go by, and there's still no guardian. Ahmed and his brother are getting fed up. How can we explain to him that yet another authority is letting him down in a time when he needs help the most? Finally, a guardian is appointed, and we prepare for the next battle, registering his asylum claim. More delay, more calls from Ahmed sounding increasingly anxious and frustrated, more convincing him to try to stick it out. After another month, he has an appointment with his guardian to finally make his application to come to the UK. Now, Othman and his brother need evidence to show why they are related as they say, and why it's in Othman's best interest to come to the UK. Because see, the problem is Othman doesn't have a birth certificate. This just isn't common in Eritrea. His brother didn't give his name in his interview with the Home Office, but that's because he was never asked. So we have to get creative. We ask for family photos of the brothers together. Luckily, they have some photos from a family wedding 5 years ago back home. We get these photos, we label them, and we get current photos to show the similarity. We ask about their past communication, and luckily the two have been communicating on Facebook, messaging, calling, almost every day since Othman fled. We export and translate these messages, which shows a beautiful and supportive relationship between the brothers, wishing each other happy birthday, sending greetings on holidays, sharing pictures of new baby cousins, and showing how they support each other when they're going through hard times. We gather the photos with the communication, and we take witness statements from Ahmed and his brothers explaining that they want to come to the UK. And we send this to the Guardian in France for submission, and then we have to wait. Now it's the UK government's turn to evaluate the case. Do they accept the relationship? Do they think it's in Ahmed's best interest to come to the UK? Ahmed and his brother call almost every day waiting for news. Still nothing. Ahmed is told he has to move accommodation in Paris, which is very unsettling for him. We call the local authority. Have they done the assessment of the brothers' flat yet? Have they gotten a call from the Home Office? They haven't heard anything, so more chasing and more waiting. We write to the Home Office asking for an update. We hear nothing. Finally, we get the news. Ahmed has been accepted, and he'll travel in 1 month. We begin making preparations with the brothers, so Ahmed will have an asylum lawyer when he comes, and he'll get the support that he needs. From this story, you can see that the process is not straightforward. There are countless obstacles, hurdles, trapdoors, and it's so easy to get lost in the procedure. And there are plenty more obstacles not included in this story. Like Charlotte has mentioned, the Home Office doesn't often do what it's supposed to do when it comes to bringing children to the UK. Our new legal program will work tirelessly to make sure that these children do not get lost in the system. We're focused on early intervention so as many children as possible have a better chance of making it to the UK quickly and safely. By providing legal support in both the sending and receiving state, we can, for the first time in this organization, work collaboratively across our organization to intervene at each stage of the procedure, troubleshooting in real time, and referring onwards to our litigation partners in the UK when litigation becomes necessary. The risk, of course, in all of this is that the legal procedure we're speaking about today is very likely not to apply after Brexit. So this route, while imperfect, is far more generous than what's provided under the UK immigration rules. For example, Ahmed and his brother wouldn't qualify for reunion under any current immigration rule. And even more, Dublin allowed for productive cross-country collaboration. So in the UK, in Greece, in France, really anywhere in the EU, we were working under the same framework, speaking the same language. We could reference, have a look at this article, and we knew that we were understanding each other. We don't think that this will be the case after Brexit. I believe that Safe Passage is uniquely positioned to tackle whatever Brexit ends up meaning for unaccompanied children in Europe. On one hand, we have our brilliant campaigns team who will work on the ground and in Parliament to make sure that routes to the UK stay open, while in Safe Passage Legal, we'll utilize our ability to advise children and practitioners in Europe on the current options under the law. In fact, we've already secured an amendment to the EU withdrawal bill, committing the UK government to negotiate with Europe for a route for unaccompanied children in Europe to come to the UK that's very similar to Dublin. But this is just the beginning, and of course we don't know the future of this bill. So while nothing seems certain at the moment, we at Safe Passage are more committed than ever to ensuring that children in Europe can reach safety in the UK. Thank you for your continued support, for being here today, and for your contribution. And I think together we can make sure that the future for children in Europe is bright and safe.
Good afternoon, good evening. Thank you, Anushka. I don't know how to follow the speakers, but first of all, let's congratulate Lord Dubs. He has won an award, a City of Sanctuary Champion Award in Coventry. Can we give him a round of applause? It's very kind of him he's here instead of in Coventry. Anyway, Safe Passage. I'm a huge fan and supporter of Safe Passage. I feel like I've been campaigning and advocating on this issue before Safe Passage existed. But it's really wonderful. So I will tell you a little story because I have a very short time. This is The Lightless Sky. If you haven't read it, please do read it. It's the first book of its kind that is written by a refugee from a refugee perspective. It's a story of my journey of why I left Afghanistan at the age of 12, how I traveled across 10 countries or so, and went through around 11,000 miles, and how I was treated along the way, and how getting to the UK wasn't really the end. And just to briefly summarize, I think the importance of the work that Safe Passage does is because when I was in the journey coming across Europe or half of the world, at no point did I come across any legal support. I was in prison in almost every country that I went through, and there was no representation by a lawyer or by a caseworker to me. And so it's great that this system exists, and it's strange that the UK always try to send people from here back to Europe because they have fingerprints there, but it's very difficult for people to come through when they have family here. And I had a brother here. I mean, the strange thing is that the UK, once I was in the UK, the government didn't even try to find him here, let alone helping me getting from Cali to here. So I left Afghanistan because of the war and conflict, unfortunately. That's been happening for many years there, not only least in the last 18 years, but in the last 35 years or so, I have lost members of my family to the war. And like many Afghans, I had to flee. I was forced to flee at a very young age. And I traveled with smugglers and traffickers. Me and my brother were supposed to be together. We were separated by the smugglers. And I went all alone, but I met other refugees and other Afghans who supported me along the way because I was at a very young age, and went through Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, Bulgaria. I spent a lot of time in like terrible conditions, inhumane conditions. We were kept in places like chicken coops and places. Basically, the smugglers treated us as a commodity. There was very few occasions where the traffickers and smugglers treated us as a human being and showed some dignity and respect towards us. But in most cases, they just made money out of our desperations. And so I traveled across Turkey walking most of the time and being in trucks during the day and crossing borders undocumented without documents, and then jumping from a moving train in Bulgaria and hoping that it was a European country and we would be welcomed and our human rights would be respected. But actually, there was nothing European about Bulgaria, unfortunately. And we were arrested, imprisoned, and then deported back to Turkey in the middle of December of 2006 in snow. And even now, the situation hasn't been improved. There are some right-wing malicious groups where they target refugees and tortures them and sends them back to Turkey. And the government doesn't really do much other than to encourage it. And so I was arrested in Turkey, again in Istanbul, spent 2 weeks in prison with criminals, with people who were actually perhaps murderers and drug dealers. And my crime was seeking safety and seeking protection. I left violence, I left things, grown up in a war zone. I've seen people die in front of me, I've seen houses get burned down. I lived in constant fear of being killed by rocket attacks and by bombings at night, and spent a lot of days in the early 2001 when the US campaign was, the bombing campaign was happening in bunkers. So, that has impact on me even now, 12 years later when I made the journey. So I spent 2 weeks in prison in Istanbul, then deported all the way back to Iran. So the journey wasn't straightforward. There's a lot of back and forth. And I had to come all the way back again. And at every stage of the way, I was looking for my brother, hoping to find him, but he was nowhere to be seen. And then third time lucky, I made it to Greece on on top of a boat, which was literally designed for 20 to 30 people. The smugglers, the traffickers put 120 of us in there. I've never seen the sea before. I was frightened, I was scared. It's easy for me to stand here to explain, but actually when I was going through the experience, it's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. We were in a jungle, in a forest, in a place called Izmir for 3 days and 3 nights because the boat did not arrive. Our food, water, everything ran out. And then when we were taken in a small boat to a bigger boat the third night by the traffickers, we ended up being in the sea for 48 hours to almost 50 hours. And if things wasn't getting worse, our boat break down. And so whenever I see stories of people drowning in boat capsizing, it resonates, it brings back memory because I could have been one of those nameless people. There has been 15,000 people drowning in the last 4 years or so. There are about 60,000 refugees dying across the world trying to make it to safety. The Rohingyas in Myanmar, the people in sub-Saharan Africa, from Eritrea, from Somalia, and unfortunately the EU has been sending people back to Turkey, which Turkey is definitely not a place to be sending refugees back to. And particularly when it comes to Afghans. Turkey has been deporting Afghans at a very high level, and the EU has been sending, that's the only thing that makes me angry about the EU is how they treat refugees. Other than that, I'm not going to start on Brexit, but anyways. So the EU is sending people back to Libya. There has been reports of enslavement. It makes me angry, and that's why I've been campaigning and advocating for refugees' rights, for legal and safer routes for people to travel. And so when we were in the sea, when our boat broke down, on many occasions I thought I was going to die, but here I was certain I was going to die. And the concern in my head was that my mom will not know what has happened to me. My family will live in hope that I will come home one day, but I will never come home. And so I thought, I became quite religious on the journey, tried to pray 5 times a day, read the Quran, and I had a conversation with God that I don't mind dying, but not now, not here, not like this, not in the middle of the sea. And thankfully we survived. We were rescued by the Greek Coast Guards and taken to safety. Local people brought us water and food. We hadn't had proper food and water for a week. And so anyways, we went to Athens. There was a legal limbo where we were told to leave the country in a month and then put in prison for 3 months. Nothing really made sense. And after 11 years, I went back to Athens a few months ago. And the situation is actually worse. It's not better when it comes to how they treat refugees. And Greece is really struggling. I made it to Italy on a top of a lorry engine, which was really, really hot. If I let my hand go of the things that I was holding on to, I could be underneath the tires. So somehow I survived, made it to Italy. Italy was the only place where I was treated humanely with compassion and care by the authorities, by the police. I was placed in a care home, but I had to, by then I knew my brother was in the UK, so I had to continue somehow, come to England. And the journey continued, actually run away from a children's home. I'm just keeping it short. There was a lot of things happening between. I made it to, I got help from one of my brother's friends in Rome. I was really disappointed to see people sleeping in the park in Rome, people sleeping in carton boxes. I heard great things about Rome and the Roman Empire. I was somehow associating the two together. But I made it to Paris, and I spent a very cool night in the park in Paris, and I was trying to stay in a telephone box. The police didn't allow me there, so I had to stay outside. The next day I went to Calais, and when I arrived in Calais, it was more miserable than I've ever imagined, than I ever thought. I spent about a month there, but until I wrote the book in 2015, I thought I was there for 3 months. That's how bad the situation were. There were about 500 of us in the jungle. The police used to arrest me sometimes twice a day for no apparent reason. I would be walking from the police station, they would arrest me again. I'm like, look, I'm just coming from the police station, And it was crazy. It was cold, it was miserable, it was humiliating. Now they're actually burning people's blankets and shoes. It's crazy how tear gassing people. The jungle, the camp was somewhat good. There was a sense of a community. I'm glad it doesn't exist because it was shame for Britain, shame for Europe. But now they're even more worse the situation as it is. And so thankfully I made it to the UK on the back of a refrigerator lorry after my 100th attempt. I felt relieved. If the driver had put on the freezer, we would have been killed in the last leg of our journey, literally. But thankfully we survived, and getting to the UK wasn't the end. This was another battle with the Home Office and social services over. They disputed my age, they disputed my nationality. They couldn't understand the traumas and the things that I had to go through to get here. And so it took me 2 years to convince them, to fight them over my age, that I was 13 by the time and I was an Afghan national. It took me 5 years to get a refugee status. The reason I'm standing here, if the Home Office and the social services get away with what they were doing to my future and to me, I wouldn't be, perhaps, not only not be here, but perhaps not even be alive, because the Home Office threatened to deport me twice. But the strange thing was, I don't know where they were deporting me to, because they didn't believe I was from Afghanistan. And since the last 11 years being in the UK, it took me 10 years to get my settled status. I'm hoping to get my citizenship soon. I haven't been able to travel freely. I haven't been able to vote, and I have a lot of responsibility, very few rights. And I managed to go to school, to learn English, to get 10 GCSEs, to go to college, to do A-levels, to do all sorts of things outside. I mean, I funded a charity recently. I've been part of 20, 30 different committees and commission trying to find solutions for child poverty, youth unemployment. So when you give refugees the chance and the guidance and the help, they will become people who will contribute. And we shouldn't just support people because they will contribute, but we should support them because it's the right thing to do. We should respect their human rights. And then now I'm actually graduating from my master's soon. All those things I never thought was possible. But people like Safe Passage, I was supported by the Children's Society, by Bernardo. I was involved with the UK Youth Parliament and the British Youth Council. All these things, those positive influence have helped me. All those encouragement, the people that I met along the way, my teachers, even social workers, who are quite reluctant because of the system that we have in place, the system of disbelief. Going through the Home Office system is such that the asylum process is that you are guilty, you have to prove yourself innocent, and it's very difficult. And it's great to have people who can represent you. I mean, I was for trouble for things that I've said in the first interview, not said again. I was in trouble for things I have told my solicitor but not told the Home Office, and my credibility was under question, and there was very little I could do. But thankfully, I have overcome it with the help and support of people. So I encourage you, please, put the pressure on the government and support Safe Passage so they can help children like myself. And if there was Safe Passage when I was making the journey, perhaps I wouldn't have to go through what I went through. And whenever I went back to Cali in recent years, when I was allowed to travel, I saw children younger than me in Cali. And it's heartbreaking that the situation has not improved. More than ever, we ought to give those people hope. And one of the things that kept me going even now is faith and hope. I have not seen my mom for 12 years, and it's sad, but at the same time, I'm doing everything I can to try to use my experiences as something positive, trying to make a difference, to try to have an impact, and trying to get people to take action and to show solidarity and to stand with people in need. And I thank you for listening, and I could go on and on. But
Lali, that was inspiring. I'm going to read this book immediately. Oh, that's for me.
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to start it on my way home. My day job is to present a daily podcast for The Guardian, and it is just so inspiring to hear you all, because so much of what you do touches on the work that we do. For example, when you were talking about the pull factor, just recently we were talking to people about how trying to reduce that pull factor was sending people back to Libya and the situation they were facing there. Alf, when you were talking about the lack of hope, I was thinking about a psychologist in a Greek camp that we were interviewing recently. He said he'd never seen mental health conditions like that in countries like Afghanistan even, because of the hopelessness. And Darby, when you were talking about Brexit, I was thinking, what does Brexit mean for all this? Hopefully we can get into a bit of that now with a Q&A. How many people want to ask questions? Then I can figure out how to do it. We've got some questions? Okay, let's do it one by one then. Can you tell us who you are and then ask the question? Lady over there.
Hi, my name's Juliet Gilpin. I guess there's some people in the room here who are fairly new to Safe Passage. There might be others who have journeyed with Safe Passage since the beginning. And I guess I'm just wondering kind of what's kept you going. Safe Passage has adapted to different circumstances throughout the 3.5 years that it's existed. And you've just managed to keep this agenda front and centre all the time. What gives you the tenacity to keep adapting and to keep fighting? Because it seems like it's just a constant battle. And I'd like to know what keeps you fighting.
Thank you very much. Who wants to take that?
What?
Darby, you want to start? Just press your thing, and then Alf, you can.
So I think for me, in terms of what keeps me going, it's the individual stories. It's the phone calls that we receive each week of a new case, of a situation where a child has just arrived in Greece and who has every hope of making it to the UK. But more than that, it's attending some of the arrivals. We're lucky to sometimes go to Heathrow or go to St. Pancras and actually watch that beautiful, heartbreaking and joyful moment when a brother who hasn't seen his brother in 10 years, they embrace, or when we recently had a mother and a daughter who were separated by smugglers reunite after 3 years, and thinking that the other had perished along the journey. And I think if you see one of those reunions, it can keep you going for years.
Al?
Well, I suppose one of the main things keeps me going is actually pressure from Safe Passage. You may laugh, but it's true. You know, if I wanted to stop, they wouldn't let me. So I just keep going. But the other thing is, you know, even if the numbers we've brought here are small in relation to the need, any one young person getting here, joining their family, has a chance to have a life. When stuck in the camps, and you've heard it vividly at first hand from Gulwali, being stuck in those camps, it is a desperate situation, absolutely desperate. And to give even one person a chance of a decent life, coming here, with joining their family, gives one a sense that it's worth doing. And I suppose that's one of the motivating factors.
Completely agree. I think one of the reasons I do what I do as well is raising awareness. I've done like travel to 20 countries. I've done like over 300 talks in the last 4 years, and the book is published in 8 countries, which I didn't really thought would happen. But it's amazing how I've been able to have a platform to actually give a voice to the voiceless, to be a human face. Because I hate hearing about the statistics and numbers, because you know, refugees are human beings just like you and me. They have hopes, they have dreams, and the least I could do is to actually, you know, represent them and give them a voice. Because a lot of the time people talk about us with a lot of good intentions, but very rarely do we hear from refugees themselves. So it's great to have the chance. And I feel, you know, I went through a difficult ordeal. I went through a hellish journey, and I want other people not to have to go through what I went through. And at the same time, I want other refugees to have the opportunities that I had, even though after much struggle. And so, yeah, that's what keeps me going, actually.
Thank you. Well, I was just thinking that I think this feeds in to what Lord Dubs was saying at the what Lord Dubs was saying at the beginning, which is hope. I think in my case, it's hope that keeps me going. Hope that the system will ultimately be a just and a fair one, and one which is humane to, as we would like to be treated if it happened to us. There may also be a little bit of anger that people are not being treated right, but largely I think it's hope.
Thank you very much. Who else has got a question? What I'll do is I'll take a couple, so many people can answer. The gentleman there.
So my name's Asif. I've been out with my name's Asif, and I've been out with Safe Passage. Hello? I scared myself there. So my name's Asif. I've been out with Safe Passage last summer, and what I wanted to say was in 1939 the refugees weren't a liability, and the refugees are seen as being a liability now. That's basically that's the massive talking point of what Brexit is about. And all charities are basically they're a business transaction. You've got the choice of either giving a small amount of money, which basically is one intervention, and if you bring that refugee, like our friend here, reunited with his brother, and making obviously a very positive contribution to society, or you can support the same refugee through a different means, whether it's disaster relief or famine or whatever it may be, and support them for the next 30 years. So it's cheaper to actually intervene, reunite them, so they're no longer a financial burden on whichever charity than it is to actually support them for the next 10 years, 15 years. And the second thing I wanted to make is that in many parts of the world there are generations, there's a whole lost generation, certainly in Syria, where you basically wiped out generation of education, and you created a very angry group of people that have no access to education, health, food, etc., etc. Okay. And if we don't break that cycle, you're then going to create the next 10 years of anger, which obviously is going to manifest itself in these so-called terrorist groups and all the other, which is very, very unproductive. So actually, from a business perspective, for those of you people in the sector, it's far more economical to intervene in this way, in a positive way, than it is just to keep throwing fish, you know, was it give a man a fish and feed them for a day. That's why Safe Passage is so effective. It's not a sexy charity, it's quite a hard sell actually as a charity. But if you think about it as an opportunity to give whatever you're going to give, it pays returns. And obviously one thing I'd like to say is I hope Lord Dubs doesn't take early retirement.
And there was a lady there? Yeah.
probably don't need a microphone because I'm a lawyer, but thanks very much for this. So I'm a partner at Reed Smith, so thank you very much for being here. I guess the question I had to ask, and this was sort of conversation we were having earlier, is that when you are your average person, that I'm sorry, I didn't go off to be a banker, but I did become a lawyer, and you're in the city and you don't have the interface of dealing with some of the things that you guys are dealing with regularly, but you care and you want to make a difference. What can we do in our daily lives, or the things that we do, other than donate money to charity or perhaps give pro bono time, to actually help increase the impact? Because I would like to believe that there are lots of individuals doing everyday jobs that actually really care about this stuff and are frustrated by the issues that you've raised. So I'd be interested on your perspective as to what we can be doing to try and bring about the change and support the work that you do.
Thank you very much. So it wasn't quite a question, but I think the first point was about whether it's actually less costly if you intervene at an earlier stage rather than later on. And then that second question on what can we do. Charlotte, do you want to start?
Well, on what we can do, I mean, I think other than the giving money and helping in other ways, pro bono or whatever, I think it's about spreading the news really, and also sort of spreading an idea that people actually want to facilitate family reunification, because and other forms of opening legal routes, because I think in the end the hostility that governments have to these legal routes is based in political fear, and the more people show that they want people to come lawfully and that they value lawful movement and that they don't support the consequences of unlawful movement, which is in extreme danger to those involved, and humility and lack of dignity. The more that message is spread, the better. And so I would have thought anything you can think of, whether it's using social media for those who are better at it than I am, about spreading that message, the better. So I think that would be my penny's worth.
Lord Dubs?
Okay, in answer to the first question or comment, yeah, of course it is wasteful. Some of the people in the camps, their lives are being wasted. They've got no lives. It is a waste of a human being. And of course, if we don't help them in a positive way, they can then turn to, unhelpful or even terrorist activities. I'm not saying that's typical, but certainly just to waste a human life is the most terrible thing. As regards what you can do, not as a lawyer, but as a citizen, I'll send you away with an ask. First of all, you could all contact your members of parliament. Ask them whether they support the idea of our taking refugees, particularly under the Dublin III, but also under my amendment. Ask them whether they're committed to doing it. If they are committed, pat them on the back. If they aren't, you can ask them to do something. Secondly, you can talk to your local councillors, and you could say to them, what is your local authority doing about taking refugees? You'll find some are doing a fantastic job. Some may not be doing too much. So let your voices be heard. You're people of influence. You're people who know what you want to happen. Ask your politicians. Politicians are there for you. And maybe some of them would like a change from discussing Brexit anyway.
Wouldn't we all? Go on, can you answer this? But also, can I just ask you something? You mentioned when you were speaking about coming here and people not believing you about your age. And there was this time when there was a real hostility towards people. Perhaps pictures were on front pages saying that's not your age. I mean, do you see what you're doing here with your book partly as trying to break down those negative stereotypes?
Indeed, I think the whole newspaper articles about people coming here and the images, I think it was quite immoral. Some young people perhaps were older than 18, and you have to understand why. It's because if you're over 18, you will perhaps be deported, you will be detained, you will become destitute. So our system is broken. So I'm not saying everyone is, but when I was saying I was 13, they didn't believe me, and I had no way of proving it. And when I was able to prove it, social service wanted to negotiate, saying we will accept the day and the month, but not the year. And I was like, great, my age is now up for negotiation. So I'm trying to challenge those negative stereotypes and negative myths, because a lot of people, refugees and asylum seekers, doesn't even want people to know they're refugees because of the negativity attached to the terms. But ultimately, it's not. It's me being a refugee does not define me, just a legal label on me. I'm more than that. I'm a student, I'm an activist, I'm a campaigner, I'm an author. And sometimes the media is very good at not saying anything other than just putting you in a victim box and just labeling you in such a way. Anyways, to answer the question, thank you about the question what you could do, because I get asked this a lot when I travel across the UK. People are very kind and generous, and I think one of the things that kept me going on the journey was over a year across the world was people smiling at me and showing me kindness and acknowledging that I'm a human being, and sometimes giving me some money or giving me some food or even like giving me a lift. I remember once walking from Belgium to Calais, and this lady stopped by and took me to Calais. She was going in a different direction, but she was so kind. And actually, that's a criminal activity now if you help refugees in Calais or in Italy. It's crazy what Europe is coming to. But the things that we could do as individuals is we can protest, we can write to our MPs. We're very important working with local councils. I was fostered for 2 years, by a wonderful foster family in Bolton. So if we have space in the house and able to fostering is an amazing way of helping a young person to achieve their potential and help them to have a family in warmth and love. And I think things like befriending, mentoring, giving to charities like Safe Passage, and just basically showing compassion and things like that makes a difference, because a lot of people are wanting to do something, but sometimes they don't know what they want to do, how they could get involved in what they could do, because they feel overwhelmed. And as Lord Dubs says, if you can help one person, that's one person, and that one person might become someone really successful and influential. And the question about economics, it's not about economics, it's about human rights, it's about human dignity, it's about peace and security. So Britain been actually intervening in places militarily, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria and elsewhere, and not taking responsibility for the outcome and what comes out of it. I wish I didn't have to make the journey. I wish I wasn't here. If I had to choose, I would want to be with my loved ones. No matter how successful I become, it doesn't mean anything to me. When people write me saying, oh, go back to your country, we don't need you here, and all these things on Twitter, I'm like, I would love to, but it's just not possible. Afghanistan is a war zone. There are 20 terrorist organizations operating. We have the second largest refugee population in the world. So for me, it's not about money, it's about what is the right thing to do. And I think, yes, it's true, you could save money by allowing people like me to get an education, to have opportunities, and I've been paying my tax, I've been working extremely hard. Even though, as I said, I have a lot of rights, but not a lot of responsibility, but not rights. We just need to give those young people a chance and give them the ability to, not to waste their life. And so it shouldn't be about economics. It should be more about, human rights and people's dignity and people's lives. I hope that makes sense.
I'm going to look at Eleanor and say, can I still 3 minutes? You will. So in the 3 minutes, I'm just going to say what this gentleman wants to say, and then Darby, I'm going to come to you, and then we might have a very quick 20 seconds from everyone.
Really, this question is directed at Lord Dubs. When you arrived here, on Kindle transport, how were you treated when you arrived? Were you welcomed? Were you treated with suspicion? And how is that related to maybe children who are now coming, when they're not welcome necessarily, but when they are brought to this country and fostered in homes, are they treated with suspicion? Are they actually welcome to the homes and to the different cultures?
Thank you very much. Alf, I'm going to get you to just answer that quickly, and then Darby will come to you. I'm going to ask you all to be very, very quick, please.
It's very difficult to answer quickly, but thank you. Look, as far as I was concerned, I had a fantastic welcome. I was given enormous opportunities in this country, and my mission in life is to help as many other young people to have the same opportunities and warm welcome as I received here. It was good, and I was lucky. But I think for some people it is tough, and it's not always plain sailing. Some of the things people have been through, and when you think of what Gulwali has been through, it's pretty tough. It takes a toll of you, maybe not in his case, but in some cases it takes a toll, and people need a lot of support to help them to adjust to living in this country. It's not plain sailing for everybody, and we should be sensitive to that. I could talk for hours on this, but in a nutshell, that's it.
Thank you very much. Darby, any quick final thoughts?
No, I'll just, in terms of the how to get involved, I'll make a quick pitch for community organizing, which I recently learned about, and Safe Passage partners with, I think, almost 50 organizations across the UK who are building power in their communities to lobby their MPs and local politicians. And then about the waste point, I would just say I think we see so many resources wasted by the Home Office actually fighting these cases, if we want to talk about waste. And I think that, as Charlotte said, it's really trying to remove these barriers so we can make the process work faster.
Thank you very much. Any quick final thoughts, Charlotte?
Well, I was just really inspired to hear Gulwali's story, and just to be reminded of the whole human aspect of what I do, which, although I see it in legal papers, sometimes the full story is not always apparent. But it also reminds me of one of the things I think is so important about all of this, which is, as I think all of you have been mentioning, which is that in the end we are all human beings, and this could happen to all of us. And it is the essence of a civilized society that you help those who come to you in need and who need protection. And it is equally the antithesis of civilization to push them away and stand by and watch them perish and suffer. And so I hope that one day that we will move to a world where that ceases to be acceptable. It is a great sadness, I think, that the word refugee should have started to become, as Gulwali suggested, a dirty word, something that one might not want to be associated with. It should never have come to this, and I hope that that will change.
Just two sentences of optimism. I believe, despite the bleakness of some of the things we've heard and the policies are not working too well and so on, I believe that essentially public opinion in Britain is supportive of the idea of our taking more child refugees. Not all of them, but I think on the whole, my sense is public opinion is supportive. There's still a humanitarian element in our country. We've got to tap that, mobilize that positive public opinion. Without that public opinion, we wouldn't have got where we've got to, and we can go further with public opinion on our side.
Thank you. Quick final word, Gulwali?
Sure, I think we need to challenge the hostile environment. I think I was not welcomed by the system, but I was welcomed by the people. And I was fostered 3 years later that I arrived, but it was a really positive experience. And I think we need to play our fair share. Of course, there are 68 million refugees and displaced people, 25 million refugees, half of them are children. But we're not doing our fair share. 1 in 10 people are in Europe. The rest of them are in developing countries. Not everyone is coming here. People just think it seems to be we are the asylum capital of the world. We are not. We are the 5th, 6th richest country in the world, and we ought to do better. Less than 1% of our populations are refugees, and diversity is a beautiful thing. If they come here, they will make this country a more beautiful place. So we ought just give them a chance to live and to live in peace and help them to rebuild their countries in the future.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to hear from Eleanor Harrison, but just before, as she goes up, can you just give a big thank you to our brilliant
So I just had a quick request from one of our interpreters who really wanted to quickly share her personal experience. So whilst we hadn't planned to, I want to welcome her up if she wanted to say a few words, if I understood correctly, about her personal experience. I'll ask you to be very brief, just so we can keep to time, and then I will wrap up. So I'll hand over to Noon, who's one of our volunteer interpreters at Safe Passage.
I'm very happy to be here. My name is Noon, and I am Sudanese. I came here at the UK as a student to do my master's. And one day I was working on a submission of mine, and it hit me that maybe I should put my languages to good use. I speak Arabic, it's my mother tongue, and I speak French as well. And I thought that I remembered something that I experienced a few years before that. In 2015, I was in France to do a language course, and it was in Vichy. And I remember I stayed there for 3 months. And towards the end of my stay there, I met a journalist who who knew that I was Sudanese, and he was very interested in meeting me. He asked some of the people attending an event I was in to talk to me, and then he told me that there is, in a village nearby called Varennes, there was an abandoned barracks. It was a military building, very abandoned, and it was home to some of the people who wanted to give them asylum. And he said there were many Sudanese, South Sudanese, Eritrean, Ethiopians, and Somalis. And he asked me if I was interested to go. And he said to me that he is struggling to help them. He wants to help them. He's volunteering his time, his money even, because he wants to help them. None of them spoke French. Little of them spoke English, and the rest spoke their native languages. And he asked me what are the traditional recipes that we eat in Sudan. He wanted to see if there were ways for him to make these people feel welcome by giving them something they would be interested to eat. And I went with him, with some other friends, and to imagine someone living there, it was just awful. It was safe, it was clean, but it was barracks basically. They wanted to play football. They played football on a cement floor. It was really frustrating for them to be there because they felt not really welcomed. They felt incriminated. They felt that they did not belong there, and they wanted someone to make them feel that they are welcome. I saw posters, they're still on my phone. I took pictures of them writing really encouraging words, encouraging statements to uplift their spirits, and they talked about respect. One of them, who was Sudanese, he just said, we want to feel respected because we feel that we are not welcome here, and we don't want maybe to be admired for the tough journey we underwent, but we want to feel respected. And they were very emotional. Many of them cried, and it was great for them to meet and talk to someone who understood them and showed them that they mattered. And this experience was something that I will never forget. We planned to go there for 1 hour. We stayed there more than 6 hours, and we shared it with them, and it was just amazing. And even though their future was really unknown, because they were not yet asylum seekers. They were, I don't remember the legal process, but it was a long process for them to even be acknowledged as asylum seekers. And but then they were there. They felt great to feel heard. And moving forward, back to my time in London, I thought maybe from that experience I should find a way to help people like these young men. And this is why I just did a Google search. I was looking for charities or maybe organizations who were interested in volunteers, translators or interpreters. And this is how I found Safe Passage. And I signed up, and then they contacted me many months after that. I think they were doing some work. Yeah, I was back in Sudan by the time they contacted me. But then I knew I was going to be back in the UK for my graduation. And then I told them, yes, I'm going to be in the UK for a few months, but I'm really interested in giving my time for this. So yeah, I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you, Noon, Kenneth, for sharing. And Noon's actually helped me to achieve, I wrote down some objectives for myself, Noon, this evening. I'd written down engage, persuade, act. So Noon felt persuaded to come and step up and stand here. I'll do some very rapid thank yous, and then I wanted to just share some quick reflections on what we've heard and what really I'm asking for you now. So huge thanks to Reed Smith for hosting us this evening. We are a small charity, so kind of having friends like Reed Smith to enable us to come together is huge. So please, let's give them a round of applause. Our chair eloquently, but superb thanks to our panel. So let's give them another round of applause. And I was in danger of forgetting, but I wanted to give a huge thanks to all the staff at Safe Passage that helped put this on today. And it looks easy, but it's not. So let's just give them a huge round of applause. Now, I've been given a few minutes because my role tonight, as well as being the Chief Executive, is to encourage you to act on what you have heard. And it's really to encourage you to make a positive difference and change the status quo when it comes to our treatment of child refugees in the UK. I think it's a little bit depressing to say that about 16 years ago, I started my career in the refugee sector in the UK, actually in the West Midlands. And I can really attest to what Alf and Charlotte and Gawali have shared today. The government is not listening, and that's of all political hues. And I can really say, sometimes people say when it comes to kind of politics and advocacy that you should work from the inside. But really, the refugee sector working with the Home Office over the last 20 years has not worked. You know, and actually I left my role kind of working with refugees and asylum seekers, you know, many years ago now, about 12 years ago, because I lost hope. Yeah, I lost hope in the system, and I was so angry, I actually moved to Kenya. And I went and worked with very vulnerable children in Kenya who had found themselves on the streets, and I found more hope working on that situation. But I'm really delighted, having lost hope, that Safe Passage has given me back hope that the system can change and that there are solutions. I think kind of a really quick question to check everybody's still paying attention. Considering what you've heard tonight, who thinks that we need more safe legal routes for child refugees to get to the UK? That makes me really happy. I didn't know if I should do a negative or positive question. I'm glad I did one time. Now I think we all want a better deal for children who have found themselves in acutely vulnerable situations. I don't use the term vulnerable children because nobody was born to be vulnerable. We create situations as adults that put them in vulnerable situations. Now, it can be really difficult when you go to an event to remember what you heard afterwards. You might be more intelligent than me, but I often find it very difficult. I know I had a good time, but I'm not sure what I heard. And so I would ask you to remember one thing about what you've heard this evening, and that is that legal passage and legal status is essential for any solution for child refugees today. I think we heard earlier, and I think it was us in the audience, but you know, a blanket keeps you warm, and blankets are important, but legal passage and status gives you a direct route to a full and dignified life. And without status, we are just keeping people barely alive, and that is not okay. So it was really touched on kind of, and actually Noon touched on it when she just mentioned respect, and I heard many people on the panel talk about human dignity, and to me, the work of Safe Passage is about human dignity, and I think, and I live my life by the mantra, demand for others what you demand for yourself. And I don't think we're asking for anything particularly dramatic, we're asking for human dignity. Now, on Tuesday this week, I was in Granson in France, north of Dunkirk, and to be quick with my team in France, and what I saw was unacceptable. Yeah? Doesn't need to be washed up. I saw families, I saw 18 families sharing a room half this size, separating their private space with metal railings, and outside there were more families living in tents where the teenage girls cannot even go outside because of the young men milling around, you know? And there were people smugglers in the vicinity, which left people really scared. Now, that is not dignity. And I liked it when, I think that Charlotte said she has hope, but she's also angry. I also angry, Charlotte. And it's good to have some anger, and it's not anger to hurt, it is anger to do good. And so I'm asking you tonight to invest in human dignity. You know, because you got the emails before you came, that we are wanting you to invest in our work to establish and secure more legal routes to safety. I think that the work of Safe Passage has shown us the critical need for an in-house legal team in the UK. That is to support our external superb, getting my words mixed up, but our external superb legal partners like Charlotte at Doughty Chambers to do great strategic litigation, to take the government to court. And we need our in-house legal team to help with preparing cases, to accelerate transfers, and to help identify systemic problems across cases, to take the government to court again and again and again until they listen. Now, there are people in the audience tonight who have already donated to get our in-house legal team kick-started, and that has been phenomenal, and I thank you. If you haven't yet made a gift, or you feel you should give some more, like I donated, I was the first person to donate to the crowdfunding campaign, but having listened to people this evening, I'm like, I should probably give again. Right now, I think you're being emailed by my lovely colleague Mike with a link to our crowdfunder. So it's really easy to make a donation. There's also an iPad at the back, or you can talk to one of my colleagues. This is about very simply giving child refugees access to legal passage and a safe place called home, and to escape the people smugglers, the traffickers and the abusers. Some of you have probably noticed that I'm having a baby. It's not fake, although you probably could buy one on the internet. But I think it's my first child, and it really makes you think, what type of society do you want your child to live in? And I think I want my child to know about fairness, and I want them to know about human dignity. And so I think I'm asking you to let's make it happen for child refugees. We can take a damn sight more than we are, and everybody in this room has the power to make a difference. So do it, and also have some drinks and canapes, and thank you very much for coming.
Go and get some drinks and canapes, is that right? At the back of the room, that's just outside. Thank you very much.